Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to show you how to create these two icons using Inkscape. We're going to create an install icon and an uninstall icon, and we're going to do them both using Inkscape. So let's get into it. I just want to start this icon by going to a different document template, and to do that you just click File, New from Template. And when you get the dialog box that opens up, you can come over here to Other and come down here to Icon 512 by 512 and then Create from Template. And then once it creates your new document, you can close down the old one. And then I'm going to make this fill up the screen. And just a couple of things here that I want to show you off the bat. You're going to see me zooming in and out, and I have a mouse, so to zoom in and out with a mouse you hold down the control key and then just move the mouse wheel back and forth, and that's how I'm zooming in and out. If you're using a trackpad or you don't have a mouse, you can do the same thing by adjusting the view and zooming in or zooming out, and you'll see that the hotkeys for those are the plus and the minus. So if you just want to do it the quick way, you can hit the minus key and you can hit the plus key and it'll zoom you in or out based on which key you're hitting. Another quick thing that I'll show you or tell you that I'm doing is when I'm zoomed in, if I want to move the canvas around, I can do that by holding down the space bar and then just moving my mouse back and forth. That's how you can move around without having to zoom out and then zoom back in to a different spot. Let's get started with this. The first thing that we need to do is find the center of this document, because everything that, well, not everything, but a lot of what we draw is going to come from the center of it, and then it's a lot easier to get it exactly center if you just build it from the center to start with. So I'm going to drag out a guide from the rulers. Drag out a guide in each direction from the rulers, and all you got to do is click on a ruler and then drag down. And if you keep your eyes on the lower right hand corner down here, you'll see the X and Y coordinates right over here. That will tell you where you're at in the document, and we're dragging along the Y axis, so we want to put that at 256 because that's half of 512. And at this zoom level we can't get it all the way where we want it. If you see, if I drag a little bit too far one direction, it's hard to hit it exactly, but we're going to fix that in a minute. Let's drag out the other one from the left the same way. Click and drag out, get it as close to 256 on the other axis as we can, and that'll be good. So now we want to zoom in and zoom in really close. And what that does is when you start dragging these at a high zoom level like this, it moves them in smaller increments. So we want to move this one to the right a little bit. So I'm going to drag it, and as I move it, when it gets to 256, I'll let off. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other one. Just adjust where it's at. And now we have our center. The document center is right there at 256 by 256, and it's locked in place. Well, it's not locked in place, but we're going to lock it in place. Let me zoom out here and then come up here to the lock icon, and now when I click that, it's locked in place. And you can see that I can't even select it now. There's no way to interact with it, which is good because we don't want to interact with it right now. We just want to use it to help us create these shapes that we're going to make. The first one we're going to start with is a circle. And to do that, we grab the ellipse tool by clicking on it, and then come here to the center of the document and just click and drag while you're holding down the Control and Shift key. And what that'll do is that'll drag out a circle and it'll do it proportionately. And so now we have our circle, and what we would like to do is create a copy of this circle. And so I'm going to click the selector tool, and with this circle selected, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to click on Edit, Copy, or Control C, and then I'm going to click Edit, Paste in Place, or Control Alt V. And now if you look in your Tools panel over here to the right, you're going to see that we have two paths, one on top of the other, and they're both on layer 1. I want to scale the top one down, so I'm going to drag this arrow down and to the left while I hold down the Control and Shift keys. And you'll see that as I do that, it shrinks that top one to a smaller size. Now I want to copy and paste this in place one more time with the small one selected, because I'm going to make a third circle on top. So I'm just going to hit Control C, Control Alt V, and that pasted another one in place. And I'm going to scale this down with Control Shift and drag that circle down. Okay, so we have three paths stacked. We want to take this second one, this medium-sized one, and we want to use it to remove part of the large one. Let me turn off the small one because we're not using it right now. We're just going to use this small one, and we're going to punch a hole in that big one with this small circle. So you can just select both of these that are on the canvas, and then come up here to Path and click on Difference, and it works like a cookie cutter. The top one is removed from the bottom one, and you lose the top path. So now if we turn back on that smaller one, you see that we have the main part of our gear. We need to create the teeth. But before we do that, I want to lock this down by clicking on the lock icon for that layer. Before we drag out our rectangle, we want to come over here and add a layer to our document. And now we have another layer to work on. So let's drag out a rectangle by holding down Control Shift and just dragging, and we're going to make this square a pretty nice size square. And so once you get your square dragged out, you can come over here and just put it right on the top of that circle. What we want to do is adjust the nodes, the corner nodes on this, to kind of taper it. And to do that, we can come over here and select our node tool, and it will turn into this mode, which we don't want. We want to flatten this with it in this state. So if you've selected your node tool and you see this, just come up here to Path and click Flatten. And now we have a basic shape with 4 nodes, and we can adjust these nodes. So I'm going to zoom in and adjust my canvas and click on one node that I want to move. You see how it's highlighted and the other 3 are not. I'm just going to nudge this to the left with my left arrow 2 times. And then I'm going to do the top left node to the right 2 times. And then I'm going to do the opposite with the right side. 2 times to the left and 2 times to the right with the bottom one. And now we have a tooth on our gear, but we need more teeth on our gear. So what we want to do is copy this and paste it in place like we did with the circle. Again, that's Control C, Control Alt V, and that creates a copy. And so now what we want to do is we want to take that copy and just flip it over. And you can do that easily. If you click on it, you can change these control handles, and you can actually just rotate this on its center point by dragging one of these corners. It rotates on that center point. Or you can come up here and you can click Object and come down here to Flip Vertical, and it'll flip it. Either way works. But now we just want to drag this down to the bottom until it snaps into place on the bottom just like it did on the top. So see, our center point is now on the bottom just like the center point is on the top. So what we need to do then is take this pair of teeth and we want to duplicate those and paste those in place. So I'm going to hold down the shift key and select the top tooth, which was not selected, but now it is. In fact, both of them are selected right now, and you can treat them as if they are one object when they're both selected. You can see that your arrows are around the whole selection, not just individual pieces. And that's good because we want to Control C, Control Alt V to paste it in place. And then we want to click on this to turn these into the rotation handles. And then I just want to hold down the Control key and rotate this pair of teeth. Now we're going to do the same thing one more time with these four. So we're going to hold down the shift key and select these two. And now we have all four selected. We're going to Control C, Control Alt V, and with those selected, hold down the Control key and rotate those until they are in place. And they're evenly spaced all the way around the circle. Now what we want to do is we want to make all of these into one object. And we can do that with the path menu that we used earlier when we punched out the hole in the circle. We can do the opposite and we can combine objects with that same menu. It's just a different option in that menu. To do it though, we're going to need to interact with the layer 1 that we locked. So we need to come over here and unlock it. And now that we have layer 1 unlocked, we can interact with it. So what I want to do is I just want to drag out a square and select everything on the canvas. So just drag from the upper left hand corner down to the lower right hand corner and select everything. And then come up here to your path menu and click on path and create a union with all of those objects. And now you have one single object that is a combination of everything that we just had. That's a pretty nice looking gear. I'm going to change the color of this from red to a gray color, and I'm just going to create a radial gradient that emanates from the middle out to the edge, and then we'll put our arrow on top of it after we do that. So the first thing that we're going to do is come over here to our tools panel and click fill and stroke, the fill and stroke tab, and you'll see that this object is solid red with full saturation and full opacity. There's no transparency on it, and it's basically full red. So to change that to gray, all we got to do is take this saturation slider and pull it down to where there is no color in it at all. And now we have a solid gray gear, which is not bad, but like I said before, I want to put a gradient on it. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to click this radial gradient tool. And when I do that, you'll see that it used the color that it was before to generate a gradient. It didn't do it the way I wanted to do it, but at least we have a gradient. First of all, I would like the center to be lighter than the outside, and second of all, the way it did the gradient is it did it from the foreground color to the full ground color on the outside, and it just changed the opacity. So what we really have here is not light or dark to light, but we have fully opaque to fully transparent. So we're looking through the outside of this gear instead of looking at a gear that's white on the edges. Over here in our color stops, you can see that when you select this outside color stop, or the one that is on the outside of the gear, you'll see that it's basically fully transparent. And if I just ramp this up to fully opaque, it turns back into what it was before, We're just doing it with a gradient instead of a solid fill. So now we can edit these colors. The first thing I want to do is select the top color stop, which is the one that's in the middle of this object, and I want to just change that to be a lighter color in the middle. And as I do that, you can see it gets lighter. I don't want to take it all the way to white, maybe 90, and then I want to select the other color stop and take it almost up to 90, but not quite. In fact, maybe just 75. Not quite dark enough. I want to come back down to 70. I think that looks good. And then let me just take a look at this edge. I don't mind the edge. I don't mind the stroke on this. I think it needs to be darker and smaller. It doesn't need to be that thick. So I want to change the stroke. I come over here to, well, select the object and then come over here to the stroke paint, and we can change the color of it. I'm going to take it from 81 down to, say, 60. Now it's a nice bold edge, but it's too thick. So come over here to stroke style and then take this stroke down just one click at a time down to where you want it. And once it's down to where you want it, you can take it all the way down to nothing if you wanted to. I'm going to leave it at like 0.4, I think would be nice. That's you can see it, but it's not really noticeable, especially when you're zoomed out. So I think that's a good basic appearance for the gear. And so now what I'd like to do is scale this up so that it fills up the whole canvas. And to do that, I'm just going to select the object, and you guessed it, I'm going to drag this arrow while I hold Control and Shift down and just scale that thing up to fill up this canvas. And then we can work on our arrow. Our arrow is going to work the same way as the gear. We're going to build it one piece at a time. And I'm going to lock this down so that we don't mess that up after we've got it set exactly where we want it. But on layer 2 now, I'm going to just drag out a rectangle, and I'm going to drag out a triangle. And let's do the triangle first so we can get an idea of how big the top of the arrow is going to be. Go up here to your star tool and polygon. All we're going to do is use 3 corners, and we're just going to drag out a polygon that has 3 corners. And we're going to do it with Control Shift and drag. And as we drag that out, we'll get the tip of our arrow. And just let off when you get it to where you want it. Click the select tool and then position it. I like the edge of the arrow to line up with the bottom of the gear. So I'm going to come up here to the upper right hand corner and see this magnet button. If you click that, it will turn off snapping. We can position this exactly where we want it. And I just want this outside edge to be equal with that one. So I'm going to put it there. And then we'll draw our rectangle portion of this arrow. And we want to turn snapping back on now because we want this part of the arrow to line up correctly. So I'm going to start right up here, and I'm just going to drag out the shaft of the arrow and then click the selection tool and then just position it where I want it. And I need to stretch this so that it fills up the area that we have. And I think that's a little too big, so after we join these, after we unite these 2 objects together, I'm going to shrink it down. It's a little too big. So to do that, to unite these, we're going to do it just like we did before and select both of them by clicking each one while you're holding down the Shift key, And then I'm going to come up here to path, and I'm going to click union, and now they're one item. And you can scale this down like we've been doing, just Control Shift and then dragging it. And then we'll still position this where we were going to position it, just right in the middle of, right about there, I think. And maybe it needs to be a little wider, so you could stretch that out. And again, snapping is kind of toying with what I'm trying to do here, so I may have to turn that off. We can just turn that off and position this where I want it. There we go. Now we'll turn snapping back on. It's selected already. We're going to come up here to the fill and stroke panel and select the fill tab, and we're going to use a gradient. This time I think I'm going to use actually, let's use a radial gradient, and we're going to make this one green, and we're going to just move the hue over to a green hue. And I like that. Really give it a lot of saturation, get rid of all the alpha by sliding that up. Yeah, we'll make the outside this deeper color green. Alright, and now we're going to go to the other color stop, and we're going to do the same thing. In fact, I want to get the exact same color, so 112, 139. So if I come over here, I can just go 112, tab down, 100, tab down, 39. And now it's the exact same color as what the outside is, and all we have to do then is just make it a little lighter. And as we push this up, it adds some visual interest, and we can take this down a little bit more, the other one. Now, one other thing you can do with gradients is you can come over here to the gradient tool when you have a gradient on an object, and you can click this and you can adjust like the shape of the gradient. So I'm just going to hold down the control key and stretch this in one direction. And I might even just shrink it in the other direction. Not too much though. Actually, I think I like it better like that. And I think it just needs one more thing. It just needs an edge like the gear has on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remember what color this is, 111, 126. And then I'm going to come over here to the stroke paint, and I'm going to do 111, 100, 26. And I think that the stroke style, if I go over here, oh, it's a little bit narrower. So we want to change this to 0.400. Click on the canvas, and now we have our install icon. Now all we have to do is just save this as an SVG, or we can export it as a PNG. It doesn't matter, either one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first, let's export it as a PNG. So you could do it from the file menu here and click export, but I have a tendency to use the export panel over here in the tools because I like how you can just choose the whole page. We're going to export this whole page, and you can see there's the width and the height, and we can save it as a PNG, a portable network graphic, and we just choose where we want to save it by clicking on that icon, and then you just navigate to where you want to put it. And I'll navigate to, I have a folder here that I call demos on my computer. Now here, when you go to save this, you want to change this to PNG, and then you want to just name it. I'm going to call this install and click save, and then I want to save this as an SVG in the same location. I don't want to call it drawing, I want to call it install, And now we have two icons. It makes sense that if you're going to create this one, you might as well create the other one too. So I'm going to click File, Save As, and I'm going to save this exact icon with a different name. I'm going to save it Uninstall. And now we have, you can see here in the folder, we have the install PNG, we have the install SVG, and now we have an uninstall SVG, and that's the one that we have open right here. So uninstall SVG, and all I want to do is edit this. I just want to change this arrow by flipping it. Come up here to Object, Flip Vertical, and we want to push it up to the top now instead of, and we're again going to have to turn off the snapping and just push it up to the top and get it positioned where we want it. And then we just need to change the color, and we'll turn snapping back on, go into our colors, and we're going to do the fill. And this is what's nice about using HSL and alpha, HSLA sliders, because you can just change the hue and everything else will stay the same. So if I slide the hue over to a red variant, you'll see that everything else stays where it's at, and all I did was change it to red. And I can do the same thing with the green, just push it all the way over to red, and now we have a red version of the same arrow in the opposite direction. So I'm going to save that by hitting Control S, and I want to export this as a PNG, and we're going to do it just like we did before. It's a PNG format, and we're just going to select the location. It'll be the same location. We're going to change the file type to PNG, and we're going to name it uninstall.png, and then I'm going to hit enter, and it saved it. So now in our folder here, we can close down Inkscape and save it so it remembers what the export was called. So here's our install icon, here's our uninstall icon, and we have the same two icons in SVG format. I'm going to open with Firefox, open with Firefox, and then I'm going to open the PNGs with Firefox. And here we have all of, so there's the install, uninstall, install, uninstall. And so there you have it. We have two icons created with Inkscape and exported in PNG format and in SVG format. So I hope that helps, and thanks for watching.